Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, S&OP in the Oracle Cloud in 90 Days. My name is Deb Bryant. I'm the Marketing Coordinator at AVATA, and I will be facilitating the webinar. Presenting for you today are Jim Hetherington, VP of Sales at AVATA, and Ferguson Neal, Principal Consultant at AVATA. During the webinar, if you have any questions, you can submit them through the chat window, and we will take a few minutes at the end of the presentation to answer them. And now I will turn the presentation over to Jim.
Thanks, Deb. I appreciate it. And thanks to everybody for joining us this morning. My name is Jim Hetherington, Vice President of Sales with AVATA. I've got only just one slide here for those of you who are unfamiliar with AVATA. Talk a bit about the services we offer, and then we'll get right into today's content. So if I'm looking at the screen, I think from the three pillars of the services that we do offer, I'd probably begin, given our content today, with the supply chain management services that we offer. For close to 20 years, we've been the leading provider of value chain planning and supply chain planning applications to the Oracle community. I like to say that we consider ourselves supply chain people first and technologists second, and that's not to diminish what we do with the tools, but rather, we definitely take a business process and a value focus to these as opposed to just stand up the software and help our clients make intelligent use of these tools to further internal competencies of S&OP and supply chain planning. And I think today's webinar is a great example of that. From the J.D. Edwards perspective, for those of you who use JDE, we are a full-service JDE practice, and that runs the gamut from upgrades and enhancement that are required to full managed services to leveraging applications like supply chain planning and EPM with the JDE for the JDE community. And finally, in terms of cloud applications, our clients are leveraging and really depend on AVATA to help them come up with a long-term roadmap for cloud. We've been an Oracle Cloud co-development partner, and we're helping people evaluate them and learn, where do these going to fit in terms of the applications that we have today, and how can we fill in feature gaps in today's on-premise applications with cloud. And I think that the S&OP cloud, leveraging the S&OP cloud for the Express solution that we have today that we're going to be discussing, again, is a great example of that. We can go, there you go. So in terms of today's webinar, Ferguson and I will be discussing what is S&OP Cloud and S&OP Express, just giving some baseline so that people know where we're coming from. We will take a dive into the S&OP process and speak a lot to why organizations struggle with S&OP. I want to say nothing about it is new, and yet we find that organizations, they can do tactical demand planning, they can do tactical supply planning, but when they attempt to put something in that's truly cross-functional, they struggle. And we hope that we're mitigating a lot of that with the Express solution that we'll be discussing. So we will be looking at some of the success stories that we have there. What are some of the common things people do to get moving, and what would a roadmap look like for sales and operations planning? And at the end of this, for those who have attended, we will be offering an S&OP assessment, and Ferguson will be speaking more about that as we wrap up.
Terrific, Jim. My name is Ferguson Neal, and I appreciate you all joining us this morning. And I'm going to talk just briefly about on this slide here and take over from Jim and talk about what S&OP or Oracle's S&OP in the cloud is. And of course, it's a new application. It's cloud-based, it's subscription-based, and there's some really unique things about it and quite an improvement over a lot of the options that we have found out there in the marketplace. First off, it's a system that is really the uniqueness about it is that you're able to gather data and take data from a variety of legacy systems. It doesn't have to be inside of an Oracle environment. It can take data, and that's going to be important as we discuss later on the the success factors of standing up your S&OP process, but you can gather data from a variety of legacy systems that are both Oracle or non-Oracle based. It is in the cloud, so it's subscription based, so it's got all the latest technology that Oracle has engineered into its product line, and we're going to show a few screenshots of that later on. It is by far one of the most advanced planning systems for executives that they have released to date. And as you can see, it's as we look at some of the highlights here, it's got a lot of features about collaboration with the stakeholders. It's a great tool for doing analysis of the different key meetings and reviews you'll have to do, both your new product and your demand, your supply, and also, very importantly, your finances, because that's all integrated and it's reconciled, and it allows the team to come up and identify what the gaps are and start to propose those scenario plans. Very important to do. When you think about S&OP in the cloud, it's really about orchestrating the process itself. So it's allowing the best practices to come to the surface and be used on a daily basis for those monthly reviews. It's putting managers in a position that allow them to use the latest in analytics and do a deep dive under the hood, not only from an aggregate level, but they can drill down to a product family and to a particular SKU itself and see what some of the challenges they may face in getting the product to market. And most importantly of all, of course, the real power of S&OP. It allows the executives to ask those what-if questions and look at scenario plannings. You know, what do we need to do today? What if we do something tomorrow? And looking at being more proactive at the long-term plans. When you think about this, S&OP in the cloud, Oracle's S&OP in the cloud really is one of the best tools out there right now for both the managers of your demand and your supply chain and your finance, and for the executives who have to make decisions for the organization. It's a tremendous tool. We're really excited about it, and we're really excited about our accelerator, S&OP Express. Jim, I'm going to let you talk about this, the S&OP Express next here.
Sure, and so here's what we're excited about. And I think it's really important because our perspective here is, if you think about the proverbial people process technology, and you know, I'm not going to get into a debate with people about, you know, should you put a software tool in before you've got a process. I would say, of course you don't do that, right? But instead of looking at it, you know, just in a linear way, like we've got to get our people aligned. We've got to get our processes and have meetings before we can think about tool. I would say, and we would say here at AVATA, you can't do those things without data. I mean, those three levers of people, process, technology, maybe add a fourth one with data, they move incrementally and they move together. And so as we talk about the pre-build or the application that we've developed to support S&OP, it is a solid starting point. It's a foundation for anybody that has S&OP as a critical process that they want to implement. It has foundational processes. It's got a data set that's identified, and I want to be clear, this data set is and this is one of the benefits of cloud, by the way, but it is absolutely agnostic to the back end or to the tools that are feeding it. So we've identified a core set of data that feed reports and metrics that are delivered to a user group. So, you know, we like to say we're not claiming that it's everything you're going to need as you begin and you mature. Maybe it's only 50% of what you'll need over time, but 100% of it is going to be used day one. I think that's really important because companies that we're engaged with, whether it's clients or prospects, you know, I have a prospect that I've been speaking to where that for at least 6 months, they can't come up with a dollarization average selling price agreement as to how they convert units to dollars. And therefore, actually close to a year, they've done absolutely nothing. And I think that's unreasonable. So what we've done is we've given a foundation here to lower the risk, lower the complexity bar, get people talking. In other words, the data you'll clean, you'll continue to add to it, you'll continue to align internally, but you can get started with what we're presenting here. So it's a starting point, it's a very solid starting point, It's agnostic to the systems that you're using, and it allows you, it's very flexible, allows you to organically mature your process over time.
Terrific. Jim, I think at this point what I'd like to do is get a little participation from the audience, and we've got just a number of polling questions we'll ask throughout this presentation. The first one's this: it's what's the focus in your monthly S&OP meetings? So let's go ahead and open that poll, and we'll ask everybody who's attending to go ahead and answer that. The poll is now open. Poll must be. And Jim, I'm going to ask. I am not seeing the polling question. I'm sure is open.
Yeah, I'm seeing it. What is the focus in your monthly S&OP review meetings?
Right. And there's a couple of answers there. We want to make sure that that you get a chance to look at it, and there's a variety of things. And what we hear from our customers, of course, are people are looking at fact checking. They're looking at the numbers. Perhaps they're just focused on are they making their budget for this month or for this quarter. And so we're wanting to see what some of those possibilities are. As we answer these polls, let's go ahead and look at the results now and see what they look like. And there we go. You know, and not so uncommon, Jim. I think when we look at this, we hear this from a lot of folks. It seems to be mixed, and you know, there's a variety of things there, but in the middle. And it's not uncommon that we hear when we're working with S&OP processes, with establishing them inside of our client base. You know, it starts off at the beginning. A lot of folks are saying, "Hey, I'm just trying to, at the end of the month, we're just trying to see if our numbers are right." And they're still operating in silos. And others are saying, hey, you know, it's about balancing the supply and the demand, but we don't do it at an executive level. And that's not uncommon. And I think we see the reflection there from the poll. So we'll just go back to the presentation at this point, and let's start that back up. So let's talk about S&OP itself. And it's been told to me a long time ago, if you can't explain something to someone in a simple way, you truly don't understand it. And this is a key principle for S&OP. It is not a complicated process. It's a process of common sense. So, because if it was complicated, if you have any process that's complicated, you're just not going to get the participation, and when you don't get the participation or adoption, you're never going to get the full benefits of it. And so this quote by Albert Einstein, of course, reminds us very clearly, if you can't explain it simply, then you just simply don't understand it well enough. And so that our job today is to be able to explain the process, how it works, how you gather all the inputs for it, how you enjoy the benefits of it, and do it in a simple way as possible. And when we think about S&OP, let's just review that again, some of the key steps here. When you think about S&OP, what you're doing on a monthly basis is you're really talking about reviewing your current and past performance. And that's an important feature, because you're going to take that performance and you're going to start to look at what your future horizon looks like, your long-term planning horizon looks like, based on performance, not based on estimates, not based on a budget, but based on performance. Typical, what you see is most folks that have a lot of new product introduction, that's a very key step for them, so they'll have a new product review. And what you're doing is you're looking at your portfolio of activities, you're measuring how fast did you bring these to market, did you bring them to market on time, did you replace them, and that can be critical. Because if you're bringing out a new product family and you miss that by a month, and your supply chain's already looked at running out the exhaustion or no longer producing your old product family, you'll have a very painful gap in the marketplace. So having predictability about how you introduce new products into the marketplace, both on a timely and to the expectations of your team, is critical. Demand review, of course, is about the unconstrained volume and forecast on a monthly basis at an aggregate level. In other words, it's unconstrained. It's what do you think, from your best perspective, from all your inputs, what does your total demand look like? And then when you get to supply, it really starts to talk about your constraint plan. So now you're coming to a consensus plan on your supply that says, we know what we can make based on past performance, we know what our critical restraints are, and we can start to do some rough cut capacity planning. This is important because what this does is this allows you to set up and do things like decouple demand and supply. You may decide to take a position a quarter early to start to produce more inventory than you normally would, or you may decide to partner and do more outsourcing than you normally would, or you may have to make some hard decisions about rationalizing certain SKUs or product families. It's time to maybe put them to bed and retire them earlier than you had planned. Of course, one of the things that most people don't get to is the financial reconciliation. When we look at Oracle's Cloud S&OP, that's really one of the strengths that's there. It's all interconnected. So you're reconciling the finances with both your demand and your supply, and then when you come up with scenario plans. And that's very important, because in order to do an executive review at the end of the month, in order to look at the long-term horizon and make those strategic decisions, you're going to need that. So when we think about the process itself, it's about aggregate planning, right? It's about a consensus plan. It's about being proactive about your business, looking out past the month, past the quarter, traditionally looking at a 24-month horizon. It's about a process that takes a common sense approach. It's having sustainable results, not just short-term results. And most importantly of all, it's about holding the executives accountable for the decisions they make in guiding your organization in its future. Now, when we talk about different planning horizons and processes, most of us have already participated somewhere in our career. We were responsible for weekly planning or weekly production or monthly planning, and it's not uncommon. We see that kind of as a bottom up. We're looking at those events. We've got to get stuff on the production line. We've got to get stuff out the door. So we're saying S&OP doesn't replace that. That's a key part. But what S&OP does is at the monthly intervals, we're looking at those consensus plannings, we're coming together and we're reconciling those, and we're doing that on a monthly basis, but we're stretching out the planning horizon. We're no longer looking at just weeks or a month or a quarter. Typically, S&OP, a best practice would be a minimum of 24 months. The reason we do that is because we want to make sure that we're covering not only the complete annual budget year for this year, but potentially running us into next year and tying our way into the strategic plan. So if you think about this, Jim, what we're really talking about is extending the planning horizon, right? It gives us more time to start to make strategic decisions, which is what we want our executives to be focused on. And it's based on proven performance. It's not based on plans. It's not based on what the engineering specs were, but it's based on your proven performance month over month and year over year. So getting back to how do we simplify this, at AVATA we like to simply say this: the S&OP process is about aligning and synchronizing your short-term performance with your long-term financial expectations. And there's nothing more important for executives to be able to predict and be precise about their financial outcomes and expectations. So now let's get back to why is it hard to reach full maturity in the process? Why are companies out there struggling with S&OP? If we look at some simple results from different polls in the industry, I'll just throw a couple of the results up here at you. Only 42% of the respondents in this one poll indicated that their business had a common cross-functional goal in improving S&OP. And what that means, and it's not uncommon, we see with a lot of our clients when we first start working with them, they're still in the silos, right? Operations has one objective. Supply chain might have something separate. Marketing has a different objective. They're not aligned, and they're not being synchronized, and that's what S&OP will help you do. Another one found that only 35% of companies had clearly defined what level of S&OP they wanted to reach. So before they even started, they got going with the process, and they didn't know where they wanted to end their journey. That's an important reason why people struggle with this. 70–80% of the companies surveyed do not do S&OP at an executive level. And there's several reasons why they do that. They don't understand it, their executives aren't educated about it, they don't understand their role in it, and they most likely haven't automated it. They haven't had the right tool to stand up the process that helps guide the behaviors and the predictability of what you want your participants and your managers to do on a monthly basis. I'll just leave you with this last one. Over 50% of the companies stated that their S&OP process is a low level of maturity. And again, so the questions are, why are they struggling to get to that in reaching the full benefits of S&OP? Our experience tells us this: When we look at the clients we've dealt with in the past, we see, you know, that we find the answers to these questions, or the things that they're struggling with the most, really fall into three categories. It's about the data. It's about having the right amount of allocated resources. That means the people to run the system and the process itself. And are they qualified, even more important. And it's about leadership understanding its role. You know, what is it supposed to be doing? What is it responsible for? What do you do as a leader, as a manager? So we're going to discuss those real quickly and tell you how we can help resolve those and get you up to a quick adoption and quickly maturing your S&OP process. Here's a screenshot of Oracle's S&OP in the cloud. And one of the things we wanted to point out here is it is very rich and dynamic when it comes to all the tools and the indicators and the KPIs that executives love. It does a marvelous job at taking a variety of inputs and consolidating those and putting them into forms that it's easy to digest and allows you to quickly grasp an understanding of what's going on in your business, and also allow you to make decisions. The nice thing about the tool is not only do you have the high level and awareness of what's going on, but it allows you to drill down inside of the tool. You don't have to leave the tool, but you can drill down what's going on in each particular product family, and then what's going on even down to the SKU level. But we're reminded here, before we can get to all those nice things that our executives like when they're trying to make decisions and run the business, it's going to be based on data. It's going to be based on the quality of your input. And so there's a lot of data that goes behind that, right? And it goes way beyond the ERP system. When we look at successful S&OP processes, we're really talking about including inputs from both the financial system, your supply planning system, your demand and forecasting systems, including your CRM, anything you might do to manage your innovations or your new product information, your PMO office or your change management organization. Even the warehouse and logistics systems all have the ability to give you input. Trends from outside of your own ecosystem, from the economic systems out there and other ways to provide you data, right? So it goes way beyond the ERP system. And maturity is dependent on how you discipline your organization and define the processes and the expected behaviors of your teams that manage these inputs. So S&OP Express, as we talked about, we help solve this. There's a minimum amount of data that's required to stand up your S&OP process, and AVATA's S&OP Express helps to manage that data requirements. We've got templates. We understand how to integrate with legacy systems. We understand what data is important to get your process up and running. What we do is we engineer that, we work with your teams, we gather that so you can quickly get to your first cycle, and in many cases as short as 90 days you can start your S&OP process. Now let's talk about resources. We talked about this being critical. When you think about resources, and we're really talking about the human resource here, there's two things to consider. Have you applied the right amount of resources to drive the initiative? And are those resources qualified? Do they have the skill set? Have they been trained, educated? Are they given permission to manage this process? And some of the things we run into when we do these initiatives is we want to give you a little warning here, a little caution to be, if your organization, if your executives are thinking that they're going to introduce something like S&OP, and one of the benefits is reducing your headcount in your supply chain team, I would proceed with caution. Or as my friend Jim would say, I'd almost run away. Just don't do it. It is not that there are many benefits that go on with implementing S&OP. Reducing your headcount for your supply chain team is not necessarily one of them. When we talk about the responsibilities of the S&OP team, here's just some of the examples that we support our clients with. When you look at demand review, there's a variety of them. I just want to point out one of the key things we try to help out with is your need and your requirement to simulate multiple demand signals. It's not just a statistical engine that's important, and it's not just the CRM or the budget that was laid out by finance, but it's a variety of those. And many folks, including some of our CPG customers, are getting feeds from the marketplace, from their clients. They're doing a collaborative supply chain planning. So those are some of the dynamics that your demand team is going to have to come up with. And the supply team, the real beauty of S&OP and what S&OP in the cloud does is it provides them the ability to make the what-if scenario plans. So in other words, when you can't meet demand or balance demand and supply, what happens if you make changes? What are some of the sacrifices that go on? So those are the skill sets and things that the supply chain may have to do. And under finance, even though a lot of the reconciliation is built into the tool itself, it's very important when you're talking about S&OP that your team is comfortable with the concept of, and it's a key principle in S&OP, of being roughly right. One of the things we'll talk about later on is the fact that it is a planning system that is repeated and repeated and repeated. You do it each month. And yes, things change. Demand signals change. They change constantly. They change every second. There's a natural sine wave or cycle to it that goes on. S&OP is about taking a snapshot on a given time frame in your month at an aggregate level and looking out at the long-term horizon and documenting those assumptions. So when we talk about S&OP Express, what we bring to this is a lot of pre-built templates. We have definitions, roles, and responsibilities to the teams that will manage each one of these demand reviews, the supply review and finance reviews. We have preset policies. We have process designs that are already preset that will help you start up. And we also, we do that because we want to enable the early adoption and the behavior that's expected from the team that's managing this, and to get you to value as soon as possible. We're going to go to the second polling question here. And what it really is, we want to know about who owns the S&OP process at your organization. So why don't we go ahead and open that poll now and allow the audience to participate and answer some of these questions. And when we talk about it, what we've seen in the past is S&OP at some organizations are owned by operations, or they're owned by the supply chain director. S&OP sometimes is owned by the demand manager or even sales and marketing. And in some situations, it's owned by the executive or a group of executives. Let's go ahead and close that poll and see what the audience said. And I'll share with you some of the results that we've gotten in the past. And Deb, you can go ahead and share those with us. I appreciate that. What we're seeing is a high result from the first view there, and that's not uncommon. And like I said before, what we've noticed in the past is that S&OP is owned by different folks and different things, but at a mature level, S&OP is ultimately an executive process, and it's owned by the executives. They use the output of your S&OP process to make those strategic decisions. And we'll talk about the manager's role next with that and what the executives should be doing in S&OP. So let's go back to the presentation and continue on. So when we think about the third challenge, it's really about what is leadership and what do management, what are their jobs, what are the roles when they implement a new advanced planning system like S&OP. And just a couple of things that we found here, and we have found them to be true. One of the ProSides benchmarking studies from a few years back talked about almost 60% of sponsors, of executives, don't understand what their role is in managing a significant change or an initiative when it comes new to an organization. And part of that is because they've spent a lot of time rationalizing it, justifying it, making the decision to move forward, and then once that kickoff meeting comes to do the initiative, most executives are on to the next task, and they forget what it is that they're supposed to be doing as leading. And it's very important that the leaders realize their role in S&OP. Right? It has to become part of, they have to be committed to the process, it has to become part of their DNA, they have to develop the culture, because culture really falls down from the top, right? Culture very seldom in an organization comes up from the bottom. So it's important that they learn to walk the talk, and that's a key role. When we think about S&OP, here's another screenshot of the tool. There's a lot of wonderful things that executives can do. So if you're just using S&OP to balance supply and demand, congratulations, great. There's a big bang for the buck there. But the real power of S&OP comes at the executive review meeting. And here's an example of how executives can look at the overall organization's performance and start to compare two scenarios here. And what they're looking at is two alternatives, and that's what you want to keep the executives focused on. If we do A, we get these results. If we do B, we should expect these results. And all those results are based on, again, your improvement performance, your reconciliation of all the different disciplines you have in it, and it's the manager's job to bubble this up and keep the executives focused on key decisions. So that's the real beauty of S&OP, and that's the real beauty of what the new tool S&OP in the cloud has to offer. So again, repeating this, it's the manager's job is about answering the questions that the executives are going to have, right? It's anticipating what those questions are and being able to have those ready at the executive review meeting. Examples would be what does my future demand look like? Pretty simple. But not only what does my demand look like, one of my favorite questions are, what's my demand look like in 6 or 8 months from now? And what's the probability of that coming to fruition? S&OP in the cloud generates that number for you, and it generates it based on documented assumptions, and it also will give you scenarios on if you change those business assumptions. Are we on track to meet our financial expectations? What executive doesn't ask that question daily? That is what they're most occupied with, because that's what they are incentivized by. This is what their jobs are counted by. Are they meeting the financial expectations of the organization? And S&OP provides that, right? Do we understand our critical constraints? It's surprising how many times we work with clients and we start to look at their advanced planning systems and they really don't know how to identify, perform rough cut capacity planning, or what their constraints really are, truly are. They may have a conception about them, but they really don't know how to prove those out. So S&OP allows you to look at that, and those constraints may change throughout the season, throughout the year. So it's important to understand that.
And
one of the other
Ferguson,
key.
Go ahead. Can I make a comment there? And it just goes back to our statement that you don't have to be perfect when you implement this from a technology perspective, and a data perspective. And I go back to a mentor of mine when I first got into the supply chain space almost 20 years ago. He's a vice president of operations for a large chemical company, and he'd said, our S&OP dashboard, the actual data sets that were there and the numbers, the specific numbers for any given month were less important than the questions that it made us ask. And I just think that that's sort of what you're talking about here is if you put something in place, and at a minimum, if you're asking these type of questions, because without some type of an organized meeting and session and we'll say rough data set, this falls into that category of we never quite have these discussions because we don't have time. So just throwing that out. Thanks for
excellent point. And I was gonna end on this slide here about the last bullet there. It's really, if you think about the role of the executives, you want them to be focused not on the month, and particularly maybe not even on the corner, but about the long-term future of your organization. You want them to say, are the decisions we're making today, are they going to affect our long-term strategy? And so S&OP is linking your monthly performance to that strategy plan that everybody has. And so the manager's role is to make sure that you're operating S&OP with best practices in providing those executives with those key decisions. It's a very powerful tool for both the manager and the executive. Now let's talk about this. Jim, I'm old enough to remember Dwight Eisenhower because I was a child of the 60s and spent it seems like most of my time in the back of a Chevy driving up and down the interstate highways between visiting relatives and seeing the sights as a child. And of course Eisenhower is responsible for bringing the interstate to the United States. But before that, before he introduced the putting green at the White House and before he was president, Dwight Eisenhower is actually responsible for successfully leading the Allied forces and planning a very significant event in World War II, the invasion of Normandy. And Dwight, his quote here reminds us about the importance of the process. The plans themselves will, of course, always change. They change the day you generate the plan. Things happen, and things happen in war, and things happen in our business, right? But the important part is the process of planning. And that's what this quote reminds us of. So when we think about what successful organizations have in common, it starts off with a commitment to that process. You have to be committed not only from the lower levels of your demand planners and your financial team to the managers that lead those functional areas, but to the executives. You have to be committed to that process all the way through your organization. You've got to make sure that you're building S&OP process on the principles of S&OP, right? You want to build the culture around the people. This is the third bullet's really critical. And we see this. We see companies struggle with this all the time. There are goals inside of each functional area or the silos of the business that may not align with the other silos. Operations is rewarded for generating a high utilization of assets. Supply chain is rewarded for making sure inventory comes down. Sometimes those two might conflict with each other. Sales may be rewarded for hitting a number, but not particularly about promoting the right products at the right time. So you've got to have a system that allows managers to meet on a monthly basis to review these values and these goals and these metrics. And most importantly of all, what we see with organizations that are successful, they use a roadmap for successful implementations, right? That's going to be critical, and we'll talk about that in the next slide here. But for those of you who have read the Built to Last book, it's a great reminder, this quote below. We expect our executives to really walk the walk, right? Defined and truly lived purpose and values will drive company-wide behavior. Remember, S&OP isn't just about the process and the tools, it's about the people, it's about the behavior that it creates. Let's take the last poll here, and this question is the S&OP process. How are you managing? How are you standing up the process now for those of you who are doing S&OP? So let's go ahead and open, Deb. Let's go ahead and open that polling question and allow the audience to answer that. And when we think about it, there's a lot of options out there. We've shown you just a few screenshots, and by the way, it's just the tip of the iceberg of all the wonderful things that the Oracle S&OP in the cloud can do. But there are other ways of doing it. We've seen people using just strictly PowerPoint. We see folks use Excel, probably one of the most common tools out there. We see people using different type of one-off applications that might not be integrated. And then we also see folks who are using integrated tools. So let's go ahead and close that and see what some of the results are. As we can see, it's pretty heavy loaded to the top end there, and that's not surprising, and not an unsurprising result that we see with a lot of our clients that we worked with in the past, as we've talked about. So that is one of the reasons we see people who are struggling to mature the process. It really is about, once you understand the roles that your managers and executives need to play, and you define the processes, right, and you start to do the process each month, and you're looking at measuring your proven performance, and you're looking at a long-term horizon, it really gets down to, do you have the time in the day to do the scenario planning? Do you have the time in the day to completely financially reconcile all the options? And it becomes difficult unless you truly automate that process. So the tool itself does become very important, and it allows you to get to that advanced level. And so that's one of the reasons we came up with the, AVATA has a lot of accelerators. S&OP Express is one of the ones we've brought to the marketplace. And what we're really talking about here is a tool that has the best practices. It's got the procedures and policies and templates. We're helping our clients with the behaviors that they're trying to see. So it's about getting early adoption, and it's about accelerating the process to a high level of maturity as fast as you can. And so that's what the tool is focused on. So if you think about it, S&OP Express, the solution itself, is focused on the people and the process and the tools. It's supporting the Oracle S&OP cloud implementation you might be going through. We talked about a roadmap being a real key here. This is the roadmap that is we utilize our methodology in S&OP Express. And I'll just briefly talk about these. We like to start off with an awareness session. And what that is, it's not training, it's education. It's education talking about how to align what S&OP's best practices are and what they're going to look like inside of your organization. It's flexible enough to make sure that we are covering the uniquenesses of your company, and those uniquenesses is what makes you competitive in the marketplace, but at the same time still keeps you tied to the best practices of S&OP. So it's educating the executives what their role and their leadership is going to be, the managers what their role and their responsibilities are, and many of your analysts and users will be driving the data that goes into S&OP. It's a value workshop. This is an important state. You're about to go on a journey where you're going to spend a lot of time and energy driving some results. If you're going to take credit for those results, you can't do that unless you know what your baseline is when you start. So we've done this workshop where we've talked about where the company is and where our clients want to go, what the incentives and movements they're going to make on everything from their balance sheet items to their P&L. We've done benchmarking to understand where the priorities are and what they should be focused on, what the potential gaps are that they can fill, and what those benefits would be. So that's an important step, right? Do that value workshop so you know where you're going to end up going. Take credit for the hard work you're about to do. Design workshops, this is really particularly about each one of the important steps, whether it be the new product review, the demand review, supply review, the financial reconciliation, and then ultimately the executive review. What are the inputs? What are the activities you do that are unique to your organization? What are the expected outputs of that review? So we've got preset templates that we start with that help to accelerate that and guide you through it, including the best practices, but at the same time are flexible enough to incorporate what is unique and different about your organization and your marketplace. There's the configuration. You know, we talked earlier about how Oracle's S&OP in the cloud allows you to take inputs and data from a variety of legacy systems. So we've already got that. And also in the configuration, it's about what are the important KPIs and the dashboards that you're going to want to look at. What's important for each one of those review steps that you go through and for your executives to focus on. And finally, our S&OP Express solution focuses on ongoing coaching. So even though we can accelerate and get your first S&OP cycle as short as 90 days, it's about sustaining that and making sure that you would keep focused on what S&OP should be at each one of those review meetings. So we provide the mentoring, the coaching, the workshops, and we also do this when, as you go on through an organization, it's not uncommon. Most of you will find out in a year that you're going to replace some of your resources. They get promoted. They get asked to do different things. So we have the ability there to come back and do workshops and make sure that all your resources are level set on the same base. So in reviewing this real quickly, how do we get there in 90 days? You know, how is that really possible? We follow the roadmap. We stick to that methodology. We utilize Oracle's S&OP in the cloud. It's a great tool. It's one of the best tools out there, as I said before, for both managers and executives. Understand the process. Understand not only what the process is capable of, but what your role, your responsibility in the process is. Define those expected results, right? What's your expectations? What do you want at the end of this journey? There is no end to the journey, but what do you want when you reach maturity? What do you want at the end of the year and the second year and the third year? And then also the commitment to the process itself. Remember, the plans are nothing. Planning is everything. Jim, at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to you to finish this off.
Sure, and it's funny because I'm sitting here listening to you talk, and I think to myself, in our business as advisors, as consultants, you know, we see just a great number of companies, some of which move forward with S&OP, some of whom try and they stumble, some of who can never get started. And so if we look at the Express solution and answer, you know, why are we excited about it as a company? We've worked hard over a long period of time to sit down and say, can we mitigate the reasons why people either stumble or they just never get it off the ground? And so if we look at it and we say, you know, getting started has all these issues with it, And we say, that's the number one obstacle to S&OP, right? Getting started, making that an obstacle to doing anything at all. And it's important to say it this way. You can start where you are as you are. This foundation works day one. So I also think that when people engage, I'll put that from the consulting side. Sometimes we make this conversation entirely too complicated. So we're trying to simplify this. This is the most basic blocking and tackling to getting started in the true S&OP process across the board. Some people challenge the concept of tool. I would say this for S&OP, and I would say it for planning as well. If you don't have data that supports those questions that Ferguson and I were talking about, the questions that executive teams can be discussing, if you don't have that, that's the number one reason things fall apart. They put an effort in place for a process for S&OP, and they don't have the data to keep it going. Lack of internal alignment, sales, operations, marketing, what should S&OP deliver for the firm? If they don't have alignment, again, they don't get started, but the foundation builds agreement. There's a basic, no one's going to argue with, we need to be looking at these numbers and having discussions about these numbers, and you can align and mature from there. I think we beat these up in this conversation, the multiple visions of requirements or trying to be perfect about data. We've got a baseline data set and reports and an S&OP process, a meeting agenda, the people who should attend this meeting, wrapped up in what I'll call a solution as opposed to a tool for companies in supporting initial S&OP.
Terrific, Jim. Let me get to the last slide here. I know we've got a couple of offers here. There's two things I'd like to remind you of. First off, we want to thank, Jim and I want to thank you and the whole AVATA organization for spending an hour of your morning here with us. And for that, we're offering a free assessment. And so let me just talk quickly about what that is. It's not a 3-month, I'm going to come and spend time in your office assessment. It is, of course, it is an online S&OP assessment. It's a high-level review of the maturity. It provides a maturity grade. It looks at some of your advanced planning questions or systems that you're using, and it's got a readout to it. So you're answering some questions. There's a few phone calls. And then we do a go-to meeting presentation with your team, and we provide you the results of that and where you are on the maturity curve and some high-level observations about that based on the question pool that we put together. So we want to make that available. For those of you who are interested in that, just use the Connect with AVATA link down there below, or contact any of your AVATA reps or the website, and we'll be glad to set that up. And look forward to working with you on that. And the second thing I want to remind you of is there will be a short survey about our webinar. If you have time, less than 30 seconds, please provide that information back to us so we can make sure that we're providing the best webinars in the future going forward for you. Jim, at this point, I guess we want to open it up to questions. Any comments you have about finishing this up?
No, I think we're good to go. If anyone does have some questions, we've got some extra time. We can take them. Deb, I'm not sure. Will the questions come through chat, or will you unmute people?
The questions are coming through chat.
Okay.
And you can see them listed under the questions on the side poll there.
I'll read the first one for us, and Deb, I think you can help us with that. Will the presentation be available after the webinar? And Deb, of course, the answer to that is, as always, it's recorded, correct?
That's correct.
And they can download that from our website.
Yes.
Fantastic. Always available. Next question, Jim, does the data need to be in a system? What about MS Access or Excel or data source? Well, those are systems in themselves. They're not complicated systems. They're most certainly not integrated systems. But yes, we can accept data, and it's been our experience. Our S&OP Express was built on our old accelerator, IBP Express, which was really geared around the old APCC BI tool. And so we started off with, it's it's been years of experience of ours is how to help our clients gather data from a variety of systems, including Excel files, including feeds from customers, content that comes out of anything, even documents. You know, these are our business assumptions. How do we document and integrate that with the plan to make sure that that is captured, which the S&OP in the cloud does. So 6 months from now, when you go back and say, why did we make that decision? Not only do you have the data, but you have the content of what the business thinking was, and that's a very important step in your S&OP. And
I've got another question here, Ferguson, in terms of who are the core participants for the S&OP Express. Who are the core participants in the S&OP meeting? Getting started.
You know, what we find, and it's going to be it's not only a best practice, but it's necessary. When you think about the leaders of the different functional areas, we're going to have somebody, an executive from the sales and marketing area that may or may not cover your innovations or your new product introduction. Depends on how many you do. Sometimes there's an independent from sales and marketing, sometimes they're the same. We need somebody out of operations or supply chain that oversees that. And typically they're going to be involved, their team is going to be involved in the orchestration and the weekly and daily execution to make sure this data is up to snuff, and the analysis. We're going to need an ops leader, we're going to need a finance leader, and then the executives. If you truly want a mature process, it's about having the executives involved in the meeting. I think that was the question, Jim.
Yeah, it was. Let me see if I can find another question here. It's kind of hard to read over this. Data, we got that one. Why is this? I can take this one. Why is this specifically related to Oracle Cloud? It seems to be a classical S&OP process. What's the difference between this and a classic 5-step process? Let me try to take the first whack at that, and then you can add something, Ferguson. Again, as we've said, you need a delivery mechanism to aggregate data so that the information is available to people. We've done this for 17 years, and we are an Oracle partner, so we've used Oracle technologies across the board. What we will say is that what we've done when we've architected this to make it two things. Number one, agnostic to the source systems, and then number two, have an ability to easily integrate or bring together data from multiple source systems, right? So even if somebody's running Oracle or SAP or a demand planning tool, that even if something's homegrown, the cloud tool just, we've invested in doing this in the Oracle Cloud solution because it's just built to make that an easier, make the data end of this an easier process. So.
Yeah. I would only add is there, if you look at the definition of S&OP, and I know there can be a long-winded debate on the difference between S&OP and IBP, and the answer is none. The original definition covers both. So as a past Ollie White employee, I can tell you this, there really is only one S&OP process, right? Every organization has a different level of maturity in it. So when you talk about either being 4 steps or 5 steps, it depends if new product introduction is a key feature in your organization or not. There is no reason to reinvent the wheel. The process itself is the same. Getting to an advanced level, as you just stated, Jim, you need to automate that so you can have the speed and time to consider all the deliverables of the what-ifs of the scenario planning, and that's the power of Oracle's S&OP tool, right? It allows you to get there. The next question kind of leads into that is does the Oracle S&OP solution have collaborative workbooks for collecting forecasts from the sales field? Well, the answer is kind of yes and no. So Planning Central is a tool, Demantra is a tool, there's a lot of other demand tools that you use to gather those workbooks or their series, if you're familiar with Demantra, and Planning Central does the same thing when we talk about demand signals. Whatever that is, that's being captured and it's going to be integrated into S&OP Cloud. Now here's the strength of it. As you're doing the analysis of that, and you've got questions about the demand signal, or you have some what ifs, or what's the latest business assumption, you can use the built-in collaborative tool inside of S&OP Cloud to communicate back to those sales team members or any of the members, right, and saying, hey, we've got to answer this question. Come look at this dashboard. Here's the situation. Is this, give us the latest update or give us a decision based on it. So you're really talking about a sophisticated tool that not only does the BI intelligence, but also has the social collaboration that goes on inside of your organization that's missing from almost every other tool we've seen out in the marketplace.
But you know what? I want to make one other comment that I think those will probably close us out here. But if we compare this to any other approach for S&OP, so whether that be a pure consultancy approach from some of the well-known players out there, to people who are also like us, we have process and strong technology people. The thing that we believe is highly unique about this approach is, again, we use the phrase start where you are as you are. I think that's really important because when often companies can when they're hiring or engaging with a consultancy or an advisor. Again, this is our opinion, right? We've got a variety of opinions out there, but we think that they overcomplicate things and they make the requirements to having something as basic as an S&OP meeting, a regular S&OP meeting for executives. They make those such a burden that people don't get started with something like this. Our opinion is start simple as you are and allow the conversations and the requirements to be driven by those conversations as opposed to trying to do some design to get it perfect up front. So I believe in the S&OP space. It's unique, and we'd love to talk more if you've got the interest. Again, especially in the assessment that we're offering, feel free to reach out to us. I think with that, I think we'll close off for now, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you, Jim and Ferguson. This concludes our webinar presentation, and on behalf of AVATA, we thank you all for joining us and enjoy the rest of your day.